My name is Rosa Logar. I'm a founding member of Women's International League for Peace and Freedom in Austria. The short name for it is WILPF. WILPF was founded already in 1915 in the midst of the First World War. There were more than 1,000 women and some men gathering in The Hague in the Netherlands to demand that the war would stop, because they were very concerned about the war going on and the effects it would have on Europe. Unfortunately, they were not listened to. I think we could have saved us a lot of hardship and painful and people who were brutally murdered and died in the war and so on. But the organization kept going. Only the Austrian section was abolished in fascism, and most of the members, many of the members had to flee, also because they were Jewish or against the regime, and so it was destroyed, and it couldn't be built up after the war for some reason. They tried, but it didn't happen. So it was our generation a few years ago, not our generation, we have young and older women in our group, but our turn, so to speak, to set it up again in 2021. We organized a big congress, and we wanted, because our ancestors, our sisters from that time, they had a big international conference in a Musikverein, because one of them was a director of a public music publishing house, so they could gather there. There was a big international conference in 1921 in Vienna, just after the war. And so we wanted to have it in the Musikverein, but of course we didn't have money. We weren't able to have the big hall, so but we did fundraise for having one of the smaller halls that were built later. So that's just a little anecdote how we were connecting to our ancestors and sisters from that time. We were also looking about what were they doing in this congress, what issues were they discussing, and we tried to build on their work. And internationally, WILPF existed all the time. The headquarters is in Geneva and in New York, and WILPF was very influential also in lobbying to have the United Nations, and it was also present in 1945 in San Francisco when the United Nations were founded with the Charter, and they were also one of the first NGOs who got consultative status in the UN. So WILPF has a long history of working in multilateralism, and they believe in the working together of countries as equals, like the Constitution of the United Nations says. Unfortunately, the United Nations has also elements in it that are less equal or democratic. As we know, it has, for instance, a very strong concentration of power in the Security Council, where 5 countries are permanent members, and they have a lot of power and they can block everything. So this runs contrary to the idea of the United Nations, where every country, every member of these 193 has a voice and an equal voice. That was a very long introduction.
Well, it's been an organization that's been around for a long time.
Yeah.
Can you tell us, how does WILPF define feminist peace, and how is that different from our traditional understanding of peace building?
Well, we use the term feminist peace as a kind of short version of the concept that you have to include a gender and a feminist perspective into the analysis of conflict and war, and also into the practice of achieving peace. Because if you don't have that, you're missing out on a very important element of conflict and war, which is inequality, and in that case, gender inequality. So we think that the regimes that lead to conflict and war are built on the exploitation and the oppression of people, groups of people. In our case, we look at women, but it's also other groups of people, migrants, refugees, ethnic minorities, LGBTIQ people, indigenous people, and these systems of power that we have, that they exploit this group and create inequalities. And war is one of the outcomes, or also the means to gain power and to keep power. We are also very critical about the economic system, this capitalist system that is profiting, that is only looking at profit, but not the well-being of the people. And we can see now in a very blunt way how very, very rich people are kind of took the power and the lead without having any legitimate representation, and how this power of money can ruin democratic systems of people who try to work together without an abuse of power. Actually, democracy, I mean, no, the feminists, what the feminists have been developing over these years, because of the inequality of women and other genders, they have developed a very clear concept of power and control. And because women and other genders are often oppressed by this power and control, so they have a very good analysis of power, and this analysis can also help to understand other systems of power. That's what I wanted to make this connection. And one of the elements how women are oppressed is violence against women. And we can see that it's a very strong means of oppressing women. It exists globally in every country. It doesn't matter what kind of system, political system or religion or culture a country has. Violence against women exists in every country. So this oppression of women and the exploitation of women is an element, unfortunately, of our societies, even if in some regions, in some countries, women have achieved rights, and the right to vote, for instance, the right to work, the right to inherit. But it was a struggle always, and so these rights are not given easily to oppressed people, because there are elements in our society that oppose equality. So we think that the feminist thinking, actually all people can engage in feminist thinking, not only women, also men and other genders. Everybody can think feminist. It just means that you have a gender feminist lens. You look at the world from this perspective of these inequalities. In the traditional peace theories, most of them, unless they are critical theories, gender and the feminist analysis doesn't exist. So they cannot fully explain what is going on in the world. We think that we need feminist analysis. We need FI, feminist intelligence.
Yeah. And what does building a feminist peace movement look like in practice?
Yeah, I mean, in practice, I mean, there is the practice is developed according to the theory. So it's very much believes into also grassroots organizations. It believes into that women can organize themselves, or also other genders. They can learn to work for their own rights. They can learn to understand oppression and to resist, and to also to try to build alternative ways of working together and living together as an element of the peace movement. So it's very much based on this idea of people, no? Whereas often in peace there is the focus is on institutions and institutional power, and of course we need to have a framework. And WILPF works very much with the international legal framework of the United Nations, the Charter, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, the Human Rights Conventions, the humanitarian law and human rights law. So this is the framework that we think is very important. Also, it hasn't fallen from the sky. People have been working for it for decades, since the United Nations were founded. Unfortunately, some of the countries who founded this are not acting according to it. Especially the most powerful countries actually sometimes just ignore this framework, and that's why we have this problem. But we think, or I think, that it's not the problem of, it's not the United Nations that it's the problem, it's the countries who don't adhere to the rules and principles. It's like as if we would say, okay, if the criminal law, for instance, in a country doesn't work because nobody or many people don't obey to it, just let's abolish it. No, that's not the right way. Of course, you have to enforce. You have to also make sure that the people understand the law, and that they are not only following the law because they get punished, but because it's important. There are important rules for living together. Because if in our society we wouldn't have the law, it would be anarchy. Everybody could do whatever they wanted, and there's also a danger of having a lot of violence. So that's what we see now in the world. We have an escalation of violence because these rules are not properly applied. And some countries, and unfortunately it's also a country like the United States, for instance, they just they found it in the United Nations were founded in their country, but they think they are kind of above this in a way, and that's unfortunate. And I think it's very important that the United States would change their attitude. Now, at the moment, we can't see a positive move in that direction, I think, but because they are an important country, they have a big influence. And if they have this attitude, we do what we want and what is in our interest, why should other countries be better than they are? So, I mean, this is a very critical now point on the United States. I don't mean only to blame the United States, but I think they have a special responsibility also, because the United Nations were founded there and the headquarters is there also.
And what would you say to somebody that's been discouraged in their efforts for peace because of a lot of the things that you were just saying?
It's too for being discouraged. It's too late. we have to show courage. We have to show courage, especially regarding what we call the peace logic. Unfortunately, we see a situation where the war logic is very much dominating. There is this narrative that war is inevitable, that we need militarization, we need weapons. It's a very strong, in the past years especially, very strong movement unfortunately, towards armament. We can see the military expenditure rising. So I would say, but don't let this discourage you. It's important that you have this belief in you that peace is possible. It depends on the will of the people. Most of the people, almost all of the people, want peace. They don't want to wage war. They don't want to kill people or get killed. They don't want to send their sons nor their daughters to war. All people want peace. So I think this is a very strong issue that you have to keep in mind, and you have to believe that we can overcome this crisis. This crisis is caused by a few people, in fact, in the world. It's a few people who gained a lot of power and can play this power game with the people. And they have created, unfortunately, we have created very, very dangerous weapons like nuclear weapons and also new generations of automatic weapons. So we have created very strong means of power and control. And that's why it's not so easy to change this, to transform the system. We have to have a long perspective for that. And for now, the main thing is to prevent escalation, because every war that we can not prevent causes a lot of harm, a lot of people who are killed, but also exploitation of nature and this destruction. So every war has to be, with all means we have, prevented. And because also when it starts, we can see that now in Israel and in the Ukraine, it's very difficult to stop it. So we have to make sure it doesn't even start. So that's, for now, we are in a kind of crisis situation, and we have to try to avoid escalation. And at the same time, we have to try to build a long-lasting pathway to peace. And I've developed, for instance, it's called a peace wheel, peace wheel, with the different elements that you need to get to peace. I can't explain it all, but I think we need to have a theoretical concept also of what to work towards. And so these two elements, long-term commitment, that means all the new generations, the young people, have to get involved in it. The peace movement, unfortunately, has become old because we thought we don't need it anymore. You know, in the 80s, 70s, 80s, it was very strong, especially also in the opposition to the Vietnam War and the so-called Cold War. Now it shows again that we need a big peace movement. And yeah, so I'm optimistic. I think, the belief in that peace is possible and war doesn't have to exist is the strongest motivation for change.
And this is a very interesting wheel. I think you can help us answer the last question that I have for you, which is the question of our organization, is what can you do for peace? Mm-hmm. So maybe this is a way.
Yeah, well, WILPF in its international 3-year program, which is renewed all 3 years by Congress, tries to work on in different areas. One important area, of course, is disarmament. We have a very experienced and excellent disarmament program. They are situated in New York, and they look at all the disarmament programs and try to bring in a gender and feminist perspective, which is very hard work, because this is a field that is completely masculinized, that didn't have any woman for a long time, and now the feminists try to get in, and they have some successes already, because, for instance, in the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons, there's actually, it's mentioning gender, and it's also mentioning the victims of nuclear testing. So the people who are affected most by this are actually in the treaty as rights holders. So there's some move, but it's a very difficult work, because these powers hold on to their weapons. They don't want to give them away, because they really think that they need to have them. So disarmament, then human rights work, because to guarantee the human rights is an important element. Also, it means rights of all people, rights of refugees, asylum seekers, migrants, LGBTI people, of course. Then there is the Women, Peace and Security Agenda. It's a part in the United Nations framework to further develop that. It has become very weak, actually, in implementation. So this is one area that WILPF works on. And we also have an active group on climate justice, because we can see that this is very much connected also to the problem, because the exploitation is not on, there's these hegemonical powers are not only exploiting people, but they're also exploiting the nature, which leads to major crises in the environment.
Thank you so much. That was perfect.